Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. I have a fun show in store. We're going to be talking, obviously, about how this front office has started, their tenure with the Colorado Rockies. We're going to talk about whether we should be looking at a veteran first baseman signing, or should the Rockies just roll with what they've got. We'll kind of think outside the box if the Rockies should make a splash here in the 2026 free agency before the season starts, with just a few remaining players left that are big names, I should say. And then finally, we're going to look at the start of the season for the Rockies. What does it look like in March and April? What the Rockies should look for in terms of winning a series, and kind of go from there. But first, let's talk about this front office and what they've been able to do. It has been a great start to a tenure that really fans needed. We've talked about it often on this show, just in terms of how dire the last couple seasons have been. Obviously, the Rockies kind of had this weird bragging right for the longest time where they were the only club to never have 100 losses in a season. And now they've just rattled off, multiple seasons in a row of 100 straight losses. Obviously, the most recent where they only won 43 games. They're close to being the worst team in baseball history. And really, it was a low point for all fans as well. There was not much you could hang your hat on. You had just a few players that shined, and you saw struggle across the board. So for the Rockies to bring in Dave Podesta, to bring in Josh Burns, and now to bring in, obviously, a much more competent staff, that in itself is huge. Then you obviously get some of the signings that we've seen with Castro, Lorenzen. You make a trade for McCarthy, as well as just signing a bunch of guys to minor league contracts that we might see, we might not see. But overall, in the grand scheme of it, there's not much more you could ask for from a front office for a team that was as bad as Colorado was last year, and as bad as Colorado has been, right? We're not expecting an overhaul overnight, but instead actually having something that you can actually take and hold on to. And that's what this front office has given us, really, here in year one. And they've said all the right things. They want to continue to build. They've hinted at maybe a few more signings. We just keep getting closer to spring training. So we'll be interesting to see what are those signings. What are... who else could the Rockies possibly be targeting? We've talked about it, but relief pitching, starting pitching, first base. Those are probably the three areas that the Rockies are going to target. You can never have too many veterans for a team like the Rockies, right, where they don't have much in that department. They have just a bunch of young guys who have potential bright futures. And so to be able to bring in a veteran first baseman is something that we can talk about now. Should the Rockies avoid signing a first base vet is what we have written, but in reality, should they avoid it or should they pursue it? And that's going to be the question that we have for the next month or so before spring training starts. And obviously in spring training, that question will become pretty clearly answered one way or the other. But on the basis of avoiding it, should the Rockies roll with what they have right now? They signed Troy Johnson. He could maybe do it. Tyler Freeman might be able to do it. Right? You have maybe a few of these different outfielders. You have Krim that could also do it. Or you could also look at someone like Charlie Condon, who is expected to be called up sometime in 2026. But that is the question. Excuse me. That's the question, though, is if you avoid making another signing and you kind of rock with, hey, we're going to just try to develop some of these guys, that's what we're going to be looking at, are some of those names that I mentioned. Freeman could be interesting just because we know he's a quality bat. He's not going to develop into some superstar, but he's going to give you a glove every single day. He's probably not going to wow you at the first base position, but I don't think he is going to be a huge defensive liability either. If anything, he'd probably shore up the lineup compared to some of the other guys that we mentioned. Charlie Condon is probably other exciting option from those of the names that we've mentioned, just because of, unlike Freeman, I think he has otherworldly potential for the Rockies. Maybe otherworldly is a bit dramatic, but he is going to give you, he has a lot of expectations around him, just with the power, with some of the ability that he would bring to this lineup that the Rockies desperately need. But that's if he meets those expectations. And that's why you kind of want him to develop a little bit longer before getting called up into the major leagues. But it could be something in spring training where Condon is clearly outperforming Krim and Johnston, and it's like, hey, Condon's going to be the guy in 2026, which is a very real possibility with what the Rockies have right now. And Colorado's already kind of shored up the lineup just a little, right? They get Castro to hopefully help in the infield. McCarthy could have a nice bounce back year. This lineup by no means is going to wow a lot of people. And so you take another risk on someone like Charlie Condon who might not be fully ready. There could be huge rewards that you reap there, but there could also be some pains as well that we saw from some of the younger guys that the Rockies had play last season. So ultimately, if you avoid signing a first base vet, which isn't the end of the world for the Rockies, I don't think it's the craziest thing not to sign a first baseman. I personally would still target someone like Paul Goldschmidt and let him come in for a year. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially because, again, the Rockies going after a vet, it's probably going to be a cheap deal. Like, you're not going to be just dealing out cash for one of the guys that's available, because it's a pretty slim lot that you're picking from in terms of these first basemen. It just, there's not a lot of guys available that are starting caliber for the Rockies. That's just where they're at. Paul Goldschmidt, Luis Ariz. It gets slim quick. So if you avoid it, you kind of just roll the dice of hoping one of the guys on the roster can be an everyday starter. Tyler Freeman's probably the most interesting in that regard, just because he obviously isn't a first baseman by nature, but I think he could fill the role. And if you wanted your lineup to be the best possible, he's probably the guy, at least early on, to do that. And I mentioned Freeman just because the outfield has so many options. You're going to have guys that are not going to be everyday starters now. This frees up a spot in the outfield. It allows Freeman to continue to play every day. Lets him play at first base. But as I was thinking about that and thinking about all the different options there at first, you think of kind of the guys left in free agency that are quote-unquote big names. And these aren't, I think all the big names are probably gone in, like Bichette, Tucker, Bregman. These are all still quality players. Like, these are all still pretty darn good players. Eugenio Suarez, Cody Bellinger, Framber Valdez. And I started thinking, and this is more outside the box more than anything else, but is there a world where the Rockies make a call and say, hey, you know what? That Chris Bryant contract doesn't affect us. We still want to be able to spend some big money. And is there a world where the Rockies go after one of these three remaining big names? And Obviously, I think most of us would say probably not. No, probably not. But if they did, what would that look like? And would it be wise to look at it a couple different ways? Suarez is kind of a hot and cold. His slogan can be really great, but he can be a bit of a roller coaster. And honestly, Bellinger has had kind of a similar career path where he's had some great seasons. He's had some really bad seasons. Bellinger could be an interesting target. And this is something that I think the Rockies might consider a year or 2 years from now. And Bellinger wouldn't be the name. It would be whoever's available, right, after the 26th season. But you consider going after someone like Cody Bellinger. Let's say, hey, we want to just really make this outfield a whole lot better. You go after, you bring in someone like Cody Bellinger. And now, obviously, it looks like there's a logjam in the outfield for Colorado. But then could you flip one of those other pieces that Colorado has for more quality at third, at first, more starting pitching? That's the kind of idea that you can have if you went after an outfielder like Cody Bellinger, is you say, hey, we're going to sign him so then we can trade someone like Brenton Doyle, who I know a lot of us love, and it might not even make sense to do that, right? Like, I'm not even saying the Rockies should do this. I'm just saying that's where it might make the most sense, is by signing one guy, you can actually get more value out of all of it, because then you can trade, one of the few pieces, or, one of the few position groups where you have more of a plethora of options to work from. So you trade Doyle, or you trade Moniak, or you trade one of these guys, and in exchange you can get, a third baseman, second baseman, starting pitching, right? That's the idea there. Obviously, if you go after someone like Framber Valdez, you're just going to get a really good starting pitcher, and you can shore up the starting pitching that way. I see all of these as completely unlikely. Valdez feels the most unlikely just because he's an older pitcher. He probably wants to go straight to contender. All three of those free agent options probably want to play for contenders. The Rockies would have to outpay. So, again, a lot of this doesn't make sense. But it was more so just the idea, maybe for next offseason, do you target, a high-end free agent, someone that you think will play really well at Coors Field, and then in turn be able to flip one of your other assets to help build that team out. So that's really the idea of this exercise, is to say, hey, if you go after a big free agent, can you then take advantage of that signing and be able to trade and just make your roster better overall? And those are the questions that the Rockies will ask themselves. And again, this isn't the year to do it, but it is something after 26 or after 27. When Ethan Holiday's around the corner, it's like, hey, we want to have a team ready for Holiday, and we want him to be part of a team that's going to be competitive. Those are the things that you have to consider. Now, the other side of it is, hey, we have guys in-house that are developing, that are better than some of these free agents. That's obviously what we would all want, but it doesn't always work like that. So that's just an idea. That's an idea that I'm sure that the Rockies have had, will have, especially down the road. They're probably not considering signing a big name and spending more money while they have to deal with, obviously, the Chris Bryant contract. A contract that they will have to figure out how they get off that. But it's more of an idea more than anything else. But now let's talk about the start of the 2026 season. Because if you didn't remember last year, it wasn't until June the Rockies won their first series. And that was against the Marlins, which was a 3-game sweep. They started their last year. They started in March and April combined 5-25. Right, so they won a game in March, and then they won 4 games in all of April, which is not good if you're keeping track. So we look at now what the start of the Rocky season looks like, and if they can win a series early on, that would be really nice. If the Rockies can win a singular season or a singular series before May hits. And what that looks like, they start the series. They start this season on with a nice little 6-game road trip. 3 games against the Marlins, 3 games against the Blue Jays. That series against the Marlins is going to probably be the Rockies' best odds of winning a series. Because the start of their schedule is pretty brutal. They start with the Marlins, then they go to the team that just made it to the World Series, the Blue Jays. Then they host Philly, Houston. Then they've got 4 on the road against San Diego, go to Houston, 4 at home against LA, host San Diego, at New York, at Cincinnati, and then they host Atlanta. Atlanta and Cincy maybe being the 2 other teams that you have a chance of winning series against. And again, it's baseball. The Rockies could win series against any of these teams. But when you look at an overall stretch, that is a daunting start to the season. And the hope is that you start better than 5-25 last year. And I think they will. But that's pretty brutal. Most of those are 3-game stretches outside going to San Diego and hosting LA. Both of those are 4-game stretches. So for Colorado, the best bet at a series win is against probably the Marlins, and then Cincinnati and Atlanta. And that Atlanta series kind of bleeds into May. But overall, hey, we know you had 2025 was tough. 2026, we're going to just make sure the start of the year just hurts you a little. And that's exactly what this is, because you're playing the 2 top teams in the NL West. Houston is always just going to be a problem. Philly is obviously very good. The Mets' payroll is huge. They love to choke, which is awesome, but they're still going to be a huge issue. It's just a nasty start to the season for the Rockies. And ultimately, you could see them. It's a very real world where they win like 6 or 7 games to start the year in that stretch once again. So I'd like to believe they can win up to 10 games, 12 games, but anything more than 5 is an improvement. But just a nasty start to the year with their best opportunity to win a series in their first one is when they're playing the Marlins. So it's going to be a very interesting start to the year, and you hope, even if it's extremely hard, and let's say you'll lose 20 plus games to start the year, that it doesn't just completely derail everything, right? That you hope that they can still continue to build, even with the very difficult schedule that's presented to start the season. That's the hope. And then you'll play some of your other divisional opponents after that. But just nasty schedule to start the season for the Rockies. But you still have to play ball, and you can't just look at it and expect to lose every time. You have to go in with the expectation that you can win, and you hope that that's what this culture is with some of the vets that they're bringing in, is get the losing culture mindset out and just go out and play some ball. But it is coming quickly. The season's coming quickly. I'm very, very excited to see what this team is able to do in 26. But until then, I'm Scott Ayers. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and share with your friends, your family, you name it. Really appreciate you watching. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you